This may be the biggest problem with The Boys Season 5, the nowhere bomb site plotline and the unimaginative, telegraphed way by which the writers are using it as an extended backdoor pilot for the Vought Rising series that was actually supposed to air before The Boys Season 5, but that'll now apparently be airing next year. If I've said this once, I've said it a million times. It is next to never a good idea for strong, self-contained stories to get one or more spin-off franchises before the completion of the main storyline. Almost every time it leads to the same fatal problems. Turning what was once a strong and generally easily comprehended narrative into homework, forcing the audience, which may not care about the usually lesser spin-off content, to have to engage with that content to understand the main storyline, making the main storyline too convoluted or bogged down in its own mythology, diluting or otherwise distracting from the narrative of the main storyline in order to prop up or advance or build interest for the spin-off content. That last problem is exactly what's been befalling The Boys Season 5, specifically because of the silly bomb site plotline. The Boys has effectively wasted 3 of its 8 final episodes of its final season, showing most of the main characters chasing nowhere lead after nowhere lead across America to find bomb site and the MacGuffin that is some of the earliest iteration of Compound V that he may or may not have. And each of those leads takes the show further and further away from the narrative of The Boys, and equally deeper and deeper into the narrative of Vought Rising. It's such an obvious play by the writers to build fan interest in Vought Rising, specifically by cannibalizing the story of and viewer interest for The Boys' final season. But as far as I'm concerned, the only thing that it's really doing is ruining both shows. Like seriously, Vought Rising hasn't even aired yet, and it is literally already ruining both itself and the main storyline of The Boys Season 5. On the one hand, the bomb site storyline is decimating the final season of The Boys with its build-up and introduction of characters and settings and ideas that are completely alien to the narrative of The Boys and that do nothing but draw momentum and attention away from what the season should be, which is the non-stop and high-energy final confrontation between the Boys, their allies, and the Homelander Vought fascist soup state. Like, honestly, this bomb site Compound V1 storyline should have been executed in at most one strong hour-long episode of The Boys Season 5 if it was included at all, which I really don't think it should have been. And honestly, if The Boys were still in its heyday, like it was in seasons 1 and 2, being written and produced with that same level of quality, that's probably how the creators would have handled that storyline. On the other hand, the bomb site storyline is also decimating Vought Rising. It's primarily doing that by spoiling key details from that show, like how bomb site obviously survives since that show is set in the 1950s, like how Soldier Boy apparently has a brother with whom he had a sibling rivalry, like how Soldier Boy has some sort of relationship with a soldier and Compound V1 test subject named Quinn, who might actually be his brother, but who ultimately becomes a petrified plant monster, and so on. But the bomb site storyline is secondarily decimating Vought Rising by spoiling those key details in a rushed and slapdash and maladroit way that already makes me and probably most potential viewers of Vought Rising not care about what will likely become key plot lines of that story. For instance, Soldier Boy's relationship with Quinn, or Quinn's turning into a petrified plant monster, are details that probably could have been executed very well in Vought Rising if they'd been given room to breathe and cook. But now, because The Boys Season 5 is rushing to shoehorn them into its own narrative, no matter that they don't fit well or feel ridiculous or odd within that narrative, it's highly likely that they're not going to be well received when Vought Rising tries to reintroduce them more organically next year, because viewers are just going to remember their poor setup in The Boys and how they indeed just ruined the experience of The Boys Season 5. Like, why would I even care about Soldier Boy's relationship with Quinn, for example, when I already know how it ends so unceremoniously with Quinn's becoming a petrified plant monster and Soldier Boy's energy blasting him to death in a scene from The Boys about which I didn't even care because it made zero sense. But anyway, as always, that's just my opinion. Feel free to share yours.